There's something special about bad VHS tapes. You know, those weird, thrown-together productions that you'd find back in the 80s or 90s? A C-list celebrity teaching a skill, a person in a costume who hoped to be the next Barney the Dinosaur. Although there are plenty of crazy videos you can find online in today's YouTube world, where it's even easier to put out a cheap product, I feel that most of the best material can be found on VHSs. It had to be marginally good enough to produce the tape and sell it, but most of the time, it just reached the bare minimum, and that's what ended up providing seemingly endless hours of unintentional humor. Now, there are YouTube channels and even entire websites devoted to posting clips from these random videos, or sometimes the tapes in their entirety. Most of the time, these tapes are good for a laugh, but generally, they're not worth making an entire video about. However, I recently came across a trilogy of anti-drug tapes that I feel are definitely worth such a video. These tapes are a wonderful mixture of good intentions, unintentional laughs, shoddy-looking puppets, and brutal scare tactics wrapped up in a strange, hilarious, oddly endearing package. While this video isn't meant to be a history on the war on drugs, a little context will be useful for what we're about to dive into. During the early 70s, President Richard Nixon began to seriously campaign against drugs and drug abuse. This continued through the 80s with presidents like Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Around the 80s is when the anti-drug PSAs on television spiked with the Just Say No campaign. And somewhere, in all this craziness, a production company in Mississippi put out a few videotapes starring a snake puppet. Move over, Remlazar. Here comes Curt-Hiss. I've tried looking for information on the creators behind what we're about to see several times, but I've always come up almost dry. Because of this, I can't really give you too much background information. Perhaps, as you'll see, the mystery around these productions adds to their offbeat charm. Given the obscurity of these tapes, rather than do a normal review, I think a play-by-play recap will work better here. The first video is called Trust Me from 1987. Also known as Curt-Hiss, America's Friend, Pusher's Enemy, it is filmed on a few limited sets on a puppet stage. I really wouldn't be surprised if this is just a filmed version of a live touring show that would visit schools. Speaking of schools, we open on a playground where an ugly-looking human puppet runs by crying. Get ready, because every human character we see in these tapes is going to be pretty hard on the eyes. The kid was apparently bullied by a snake named Curt-Hiss. Curt has also been bullying his unnamed brother. Once alone, Curt-Hiss begins to drink alcohol and smoke marijuana. And just to show how much of a bad kid he is, he begins to rap and beatbox about how much he loves getting drunk and high. It's just as goofy as you're imagining, topped off with him rhythmically swigging his booze.
First, get my liquor bottle and I sip it real slow. Next, roll some marijuana for an easy little blow.
I hope you like that rap, because it's repeated multiple times throughout the video. Curt passes out twice in the opening scene, and both times, the Grim Reaper drifts over. The Reaper mocks the unconscious snake, telling him that he'll grow dependent on drugs, and will soon belong to death. We flash forward a bit to see that Curt has fully embraced his bad boy lifestyle. You can tell he's trouble from his skull shirt and his sunglasses. Curt is now acting as a drug dealer, hanging out in an alley. His newest client is a rodent character named Floaty, who Curt instantly gets hooked on drugs. He mentions that his brother has also become a dealer, although he's not as careful or experienced. To drive this home, another snake runs in with bad news. It's the same puppet that was used as Curt's brother, although this one is clearly not the same character, since it tells Curt that his brother has been arrested for dealing. Later dialogue would imply that this puppet is Curt's mother. She goes on to tell Curt that his brother has taken his own life in prison. Unfortunately, Curt is too inebriated to process any of this. We flash forward again, this time 10 years. The title card informing us this is very helpful, since all that has changed visually is Curt losing his sunglasses. The drugs have taken their toll on Curt physically, and he has become a bum. A police officer lectures him, and warns him that if he doesn't clean up his act, the Grim Reaper will get him. Floaty passes through next, telling Curt that the snake had gotten him hooked on drugs years ago, but he's clean now. Like the cop, he tells Curt to get sober, and says that his mother is dying of a broken heart.
Is this what you want? Well, go ahead. But listen, you won't be remembered. You won't even be thought of. You won't be cool, Curt. You'll just be dead.
This leads to what is essentially a come-to-Jesus moment for Curt as he tearfully vows to change for the better. It's meant to be a powerful scene. Anyone over 5 years old, though, will find the pathos of a snake puppet to be unintentionally hilarious.
Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I broke your heart in two.
The Grim Reaper is furious that Curt has given up drugs, but reminds us that he'll always be out there looking for new targets. We pick up on Curt and his sister, who is played by the same snake puppet as Curt's mother and brother. Curt is doing a lot better now. The Reaper, meanwhile, has found a new scuzzy-looking protege. The dealer starts pushing pills on the ugly human puppet from the beginning of the tape. Curt confronts the dealer, but before much can happen, the police officer arrives on the scene. The creep runs off, and the officer commends Curt on helping the kid. They recognize each other, and the officer is impressed that Curt has been able to clean his life up. He suggests that Curt tell his life story to others and act as a crusader against drugs.
Yes, I can see it now. America's friend. The pusher's enemy. Wow!
The video ends with Curt giving a speech about his experiences, alongside Floaty and the police officer. They are standing in front of an American flag, and Curt's friends even hum the Battle Hymn of the Republic while he speaks. And then they rap for the 5th or 6th time in the 20-minute video. Now that's all pretty crazy, but it's not crazy enough to be the single subject of a YouTube video. What is crazy enough is the sequel video that came out the next year. This one, entitled When Will We Learn Who to Trust, is completely bananas. This video is to PSAs what Plan 9 from Outer Space is to sci-fi. If you've watched my previous video on Winnie the Pooh's presidential campaign, yes, that was a thing, there was a TV special I covered. I said that I had hoped this special was going to be some crazy story about political intrigue in the 100-Acre Woods, based on the few clips I had previously seen, and I was disappointed that it wasn't nearly as nuts as I hoped it would be. That's because I had already watched When Will We Learn Who to Trust while working on that Pooh video, and this tape here is the gold standard for concentrated insanity. There are so many bizarre choices made with every aspect of this production, and it never fails to entertain me. Now, I will give them some credit right off the bat. The crew behind the first Curt-Hiss video are clearly trying to up their game with this one. The first tape was a meandering 20-minute morality play that seemed a lot longer than it was. This time, they're trying to write an engaging story about busting up a drug ring. It's 30 minutes, and for all its flaws, they really do attempt to make the most of that runtime. The first tape only had one bit where they intentionally tried to be funny, where Curt blows a raspberry at the cop. This one actually has several attempts at humor. None of them really hit their mark, but I'll give them points for trying. Also, instead of incessantly repeating the same rap song, they try to make this one a full musical. Finally, the Curt-Hiss puppet has been rebuilt and looks slightly less dopey and cross-eyed. Okay, I've talked this one up enough. Let's dive in. We open outside a courthouse. The scuzzy drug dealer from the first tape is on trial. He is now identified as Shady the Mongoose, the snake's natural enemy. Curtis and Floaty apparently helped apprehend him, and are hoping that a surprise witness they lined up will put him away for good. Meanwhile, Curt's girlfriend, another snake named Penelope, is defending the mongoose in court, which has caused friction between them. Curt approaches Penelope and tries to make up with her. She agrees to have dinner with him, and hints that their relationship may improve after the trial is over. Curt then breaks into a straight-up love ballad.
But I know that she's the one, and the way we feel will last and last.
Just to remind you all, we are only about 4 minutes into this video, and the target audience, kids, will probably be lost or bored at this point. The discussion of legal procedure will most likely go over their heads, and the romance element, especially the plotting ballad, will dry up any remaining interest. I certainly don't think kids are stupid, but your video has to be engaging to hook them. I'm stating this to make it clear just how offbeat this tape is from the start. After Curt's song, Floaty tries to get his attention and starts speaking in verse. There's seemingly no reason why he recites a little poem, since all the other dialogue is delivered normally. Stilted, but normally. Chalk this up to one of the many nonsensical aspects of this tape. The police officer from before, now named Officer Patrick, informs them that their witness is too afraid to testify. Without that eyewitness, the case is dismissed. After the trial, Shady Mongoose is left alone in the courtroom for whatever reason. As the soundtrack goes entirely silent, he ushers in the Grim Reaper. It's just the tiniest bit creepy with the lack of sound, and one almost expects this to go into Candle Cove territory for a second. Before, the Reaper acted as a symbolic character of the death and despair that came with drugs, but in this tape he's an actual person, and the mastermind behind Mongoose's drug trafficking. He gloats about the failings of our legal system, and sings a bouncy little villain song to celebrate. It's very short, but actually kind of a toe tapper.
Who'd have thought I'd get lucky here? Who'd have thought I'd get lucky here? Wouldn't dance to the tune, and the piper had to pay.
Curt has gone to see a congressman to ask if anything can be done about the drug problem. The congressman, like the other human puppets, is rather unpleasant to look at. He explains to Curt that the general public isn't showing him any interest in cleaning things up, so he has no reason to put any effort toward fixing it. With no help from the congressman, Curt and Floaty are left on their own to take down the mongoose. Following a lead Floaty hears, they stake out near a warehouse the mongoose rented, hoping to catch him in the act of receiving a shipment. While hiding, Curt and Floaty see Officer Patrick enter the scene. In a full, minute-long monologue, Patrick reveals that he plans to plant drugs on the mongoose to make sure he'll go to jail. He's conflicted on this, wondering if the ends really justify the means, and this being a musical, he contemplates in song. While none of the puppets have really nailed the lip-syncing to any of the other songs, or even some of the normal dialogue, the syncing here is especially weird. It really looks like the puppet is singing to a completely different song that was replaced in post. Notably, at the end of his song, Curt and Floaty appear to join in, but the soundtrack does not reflect this. Here's the unedited clip.
What's a good cop to do? Yeah. What's a good cop to do? No.
Penelope happens upon the men and accuses them of harassing her client, who's been found innocent. This puts Curt in the doghouse. Penelope is apparently meeting with the mongoose to take care of some paperwork. Inside the warehouse, she stumbles upon a stash of drugs and realizes Curt was right. She realizes too late, of course, and is captured by the mongoose and the Reaper. Penelope finds herself tied to a beam in the warehouse with a time bomb set to go off. This is as good a time as any to sing another song. This one begins with her dramatically stating, "When that thing goes boom, I'll be all over the room." I know I said this video is trying to have a more comedic angle at times, but I genuinely can't tell if they're trying to be funny here or not.
When that thing goes boom, I'll be all over the room. When will I learn just who I can trust?
Oh, that's why they call it that.
In order not to be recognized, the mongoose has taken Penelope's clothes to wear for his drug deal. The disguise works on Floaty, who follows the mongoose, making sure that Penelope will get home safely. He only realizes it's not her when it's too late. The drug deal apparently takes place in broad daylight on a playground, and based on the soundtrack, children are present nearby. I guess these dealers really are hardcore. Floaty finds himself tied up and about to be thrown in the river when Curt and Officer Patrick arrive. The Reaper and their unidentified client escape, but Shady Mongoose is at least captured. I'm not really sure how you'd go about arresting death itself, so maybe it's a good thing that the video doesn't try to address that. And of course, after that, Curt is able to save Penelope just in time. The mongoose does go to jail this time, but Curt and the others agree that there will always be others like him out there, especially with the literal Grim Reaper working as their ringleader. Curt makes it incredibly clear for anyone who's missed the point that the people's voices must be heard if elected officials are going to do anything.
We have to be aggressive citizens. Our lawmakers have to be shown that we mean business. If they won't give us better security against the dealers, then we'll work toward the election of leaders who will.
This time, the people do speak, and the congressman is forced to listen when their letters literally come pouring in. The video ends with Curt once again giving a speech in front of an American flag with his friends. And of course, they end it in a rap about staying clean.
Don't take up the habit, show your body you care. Be a clean machine.
Be a clean machine.
a clean machine.
Be a clean machine.
They also tell the audience to stay straight. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and guess this means staying on the straight and narrow, but who knows. It's interesting to see how they handled the moral here. The first video's moral was plain and simple: don't do the drugs there. Instead of just retreading that statement, the sequel's moral is write to your congressman. Something tells me the kids in the target audience didn't sit down to write any letters after watching this.
We should write letters.
Mom,
What?
get a life.
I hope this rundown gave you an idea of the craziness of this video, but I think to really understand why I love it so much, you need to watch it yourself. It's only half an hour, but there are so many bits and pieces I didn't cover that add to the so bad it's good factor. If you're having a bad movie night, I think this would be the perfect addition. I'm not sure if there are any further adventures of Curt-Hiss. If there are, I haven't been able to find any of them. But there's one more tape to cover in this video. Admittedly, after When Will We Learn Who to Trust, it's a bit of a letdown, but anything would be following that. The weird thing is, this isn't a Curt-Hiss video. 2 puppeteers from the previous video are involved in this one, but it looks like everything else was handled by different people and production companies. And yet, as you'll see, this has all the markings of a Curt-Hiss video. Let's take a look. Welcome to the Streets, starring Lenny the Lion, has main titles accompanied by beatboxing. After that, we meet Lenny, who has arrived in the big city with dreams of fame and fortune. We quickly find out that Lenny is incredibly naive. After being unable to find an affordable place to stay, he wanders into an alley and meets a snake exiting a bar. The snake is incredibly excited to hear that Lenny doesn't know anyone and needs someone to help him. Lenny trusts him instantly, despite the character's name literally being Sneaky Snake. There's a line between naivete and stupidity, and I'm afraid our dear protagonist has crossed it. Sneaky takes Lenny to meet his associates the next day, Ruff the Dog and Cool Cat. We learn that Sneaky has gotten them both addicted to crack and uses them as dealers to entice kids. Sneaky himself even answers to his own higher-up, our good friend the Grim Reaper. This time, the Reaper is named Mr. Crack. Given that they're using a much different puppet here, my headcanon is that there are multiple skeleton men who run drug rings in this puppet universe. Lenny still hasn't figured out exactly what's going on. Due to a few jokes about getting kids high, he's under the impression that these fine gentlemen are running a pilot school. Even when Ruff the Dog and Cool Cat do a rap number called Crack Attack, Lenny remains ignorant. Later on, while Lenny is waiting to meet Sneaky in the alley, he meets the required friendly authority figure for the video, Sheriff Goody. The sheriff is concerned about Lenny's new friends and gives him his contact information, along with some cryptic advice on being wary of Sneaky. Unfortunately for Lenny, we know that he's the kind of person who needs everything spelled out for him. Sneaky slinks over once the sheriff has left and offers Lenny some crack, hoping to get him hooked like the others. Lenny considers his options, but before he can make his choice, Ruff comes onto the scene with terrible news. Cool Cat has OD'd and is in the hospital. Lenny finally realizes what's going on and almost attacks Sneaky. The snake is able to escape and is not seen for the rest of the video, nor is the elusive Mr. Crack. Lenny, Ruff, and the sheriff meet outside the hospital. Cool Cat's mother is in tears. Her son didn't make it. The sheriff is remarkably kind to Ruff, despite him being an accomplice to Sneaky's criminal activities. Ruff is sent to rehab, and the sheriff bemoans the lack of action taken by the government to help get rid of drug pushers. 6 weeks later, we're presented with a familiar scene. Lenny and friends standing in front of an American flag addressing the audience. This speech is similar to the previous ones, but it feels longer and more somber. There's more emphasis put on the fact that a character has died from drug use, and there's no rapping to end the scene on an upbeat note. The story does not end as a total downer, though, as the final scene shows Lenny and Ruff going fishing, living a clean, quiet, drug-free life. The tape runs for half an hour, but the Lenny portion is only 20 minutes. The final 10 minutes are a lecture on different kinds of drugs and the dangers they possess. The final shot is a skull drawn in cocaine, which is meant to be an ominous warning, but actually looks kinda cool. As this video nears its end, I want to emphasize that although I made fun of these videos, and although they are objectively not good, I really enjoyed them, especially the second Curt-Hiss tape. There are plenty of educational VHSs and PSAs that are a chore to sit through, and maybe are worth a few laughs, but Curt-Hiss is the gift that keeps on giving for me. I've watched When Will We Learn Who to Trust several times at this point, and I'm still noticing new hilarious moments. If you're only going to watch one of these tapes, I recommend that one. It's the most consistently crazy, and thereby provides the most entertainment. A lot can be said about the war on drugs as a whole, but I feel that these 3 tapes were made with good intentions. Throughout these poorly produced videos, I do sense a genuine want to help kids. The sincerity, despite everything, does shine through. I'll end this rundown with a few questions for you out there. Did any of you see these tapes as a kid in school? Does anyone know if there are any other Curt-Hiss adventures out there? And lastly, does anyone know someone involved in making these tapes? I'm really curious. But whether or not any of these questions are answered, I hope everyone's enjoyed this look into the strange, skeleton-filled world of Curt-Hiss. Oh, and that police officer song in the second tape has gotten stuck in my head an embarrassing number of times.
What's a good cop to do when they slip through your fingers and skip out on you? When the system ain't working, order goes down the tube. The slipping they skip, what's a good...
I'm sorry. You know what you're sorry about, Sneaky Snake? You're just sorry you got caught. You know what? I'm on to you. I'm on to you.